This is Anthony Michels from the Netherlands, and today I'm going to talk with you about two unbelievably fascinating historical questions and two incredibly important historical questions also, unbelievably relevant and also for our times, even though these events transpired 3,000 years ago or even more, and according to the official timeline. And these are, in the first place, the question, what is the Torah about? Not so much Genesis, but the story where Moses takes over the leadership of Israel and the 12 tribes, leading them out of Egypt into Canaan, and next in book 6, the follow-up book on the Torah, where Joshua completes the Canaanite conquest by destroying all his enemies. And the problem is that this account has never been validated by mainstream historiography. I'll show you. Let me share a screen here. Here we go. As you can see, it says here, Rabbinical Judaism calculated the lifespan of Moses from 1391 to 1271 BCE. Jerome suggested he lived around 1592 BCE. Scholarly consensus sees Moses as a legendary figure while retaining the possibility that a Moses-like figure existed. And the reason for this is that this lifespan of Moses, either by the rabbis or by Jerome, this is what is known, this has been written down in the biblical timeline. And the biblical timeline, for the record, is not part of the Bible. It's a commentary on the Bible, written mostly by Jerome. And so what happened is that people started digging in Canaan, and they went into layers into the ground archaeologically, and they started looking at the period around whatever 1271, and they started looking in 1590, or at any rate in the decades after 1590, and because you can see all these layers are still recognizable in the ground, so they know fairly well what layers are correspond to which era in history. And they never could find any conclusive evidence of Moses and his narrative. So people say they have dug, they say they have found all sorts of things, but as you can see, mainstream science does not validate their accounts. This is not to say that the mainstream history denies everything about the early history of Israel as it is written in the Bible, not at all. But they, the real archaeological evidence for the claims in the Bible only begins, for what is known now, until now, around 1050 BCE, maybe 1000 BCE, especially when the first temple in Jerusalem is constructed. So this is the first question that we're going to discuss and which we're going to solve conclusively. And the second one is the Bronze Age collapse. This is a fascinating time in history. This happened around 1177 BC. You can see the dates around here. Can't I move this? No, I can't, sorry. But the Bronze Age collapse ended the dominance of a number of very ancient empires. So you had the Hittite states, you had the Mycenaeans in Greece, you had Egypt, which had existed for thousands of years as a dominant state in the area, and the Assyrians, who were throughout the thousands of years that the Bronze Age existed, and this basic scheme of empires in the central part of the world existed. A number of empires here in Assyria, but this is the situation around 1177. We know quite well what happened, namely that in a very short period of time, in only a few years, these thousands of years old empires got destroyed, especially Greece and the Hittites. They were utterly annihilated. Greece went into a dark age, and this happened around 1177 before Christ, and only in the 8th century BC do we get a report by Homer with the Iliad and the Odyssey, a famous story about what happened at Troy. So that was basically about the Bronze Age collapse in Meissen, a famous story, not about the Bronze Age collapse, but about an important event in the Bronze Age collapse, because we can now say with a fair bit of certainty that Troy did happen, and that it happened, that it was probably a prelude to the Bronze Age collapse. But and the destruction that took place was really brutal. This we know. All these people who lived here, all these strong points, all these were cities, and big cities with city walls, ancient monuments, megalith architecture, and really impressive empires. And they had existed, as I said, for thousands of years. The Hittite state maybe 1,000 years, Egypt literally thousands. And they got utterly annihilated. All these places have been burned down to the ground, and everybody was brutally slaughtered, including the livestock. And this Bronze Age collapse led to a dark age in the entire area, especially, as I said, in Greece. Egypt and Assyria survived in smaller form, but for instance, Egypt lost all its possessions in Canaan and never really recovered as the dominant power that it once was. The same is true of Assyria, but they did survive. So these cities were lost to Assyria, but they managed to keep these city-states here. So, and the question is not so much what happened, because the destruction is well documented, but the question is who did it? And this has never been really answered. Okay, they say the Dorians were behind the Mycenaean collapse, but nobody knows who the Dorians really were. So, here you can see that for the rest, there was what they now say a collection of unrelated peoples that were basically opportunistic invaders, perhaps driven out of their own lands, and abusing a destabilized situation in the Bronze Age, because they had been already declining. There was a decline going on in the Bronze Age empires, and these people were basically the executioners, just like with Rome. You know, when Rome had been weakened from within by all the usury and all the wealth concentration that had been ongoing there. Foreign tribes started to invade, started to migrate, and that's what happens when you have a dying empire. So that was also happening to them, and they call these people the Sea Peoples. But the real question is, who are these Sea Peoples, and who actually caused this unbelievable catastrophe here? Because a catastrophe it was. So what we're going to show is that Israel caused the Bronze Age collapse. As the channel is called, because and we will prove this very directly. First, we will show what we're going to do next. This is only the introduction. What we're going to do next is first explain short and briefly what is the Bronze Age collapse and what is the biblical narrative, and then we are going to show you how the mainstream evidence that we have, and which is condensed in this map here, and key parts, key texts, key verses in the Torah and also the book of Joshua clearly show, without a shadow of a doubt, that Israel claims to have been behind exactly these events. So that is the purpose of this series of videos that I'm going to make now. And as a disclaimer, I first want to say I have no desire to prove the Bible either right or wrong. I'm not a Christian scholar. I'm not somebody who's besotted with the Bible and wants to prove everything that it says is right or whatever. You know, I'm not a fundamentalist at all. I'm a historian first and foremost, an economist and an historian. These are my two main subjects that I've studied all my life, and I've been studying history literally since I was a little boy, and already as a 12-year-old I was fascinated with Troy, and I always wanted to know, did it happen, what happened, and this idea that we had an ancient history where you had all these empires, the Assyrians, the Hittites, and also the Hittites, and also the megalith constructions that were associated with these empires. They always fascinated me, and I always wanted to know what was going on and what happened. And one of the things that is difficult in studying history is that all the different peoples and all the different empires have their own timeline, and much of it is parallel with other stories, and sometimes it is difficult to get a clear view of what happened when, where in the world. And I want to do a small shout out to all the video makers on YouTube who have been documenting and who have been making available much of what is known about history in short and concise and fascinating little videos. And I've been watching thousands of these, well, maybe thousands, but at least many hundreds of them over the last years, and I've learned a great deal about them from them. And this also has given me a clear view of indeed what actually happened in those days, and what were the major events of history. And then slowly but surely, these timelines started to make sense to me. And then I was just reading certain texts in the Bible. I just came across them, and then I suddenly realized Moses literally claims that he's going to destroy the Hittites. And I will show you that the Hittites, the destruction of the Hittites, was the central event of the Bronze Age collapse. And the Bible clearly claims that Moses and Joshua did it. And I'll show you the exact texts. But that is from a historical perspective. What we're discussing here is science, not religion. I want to make that very clear. This is history. And what we're going to show is that the Torah and the book of Joshua are describing and are first-hand accounts of the perpetrators of the Bronze Age collapse. And that's what this is all about. Up to the next video.